everyone. Welcome back to another episode of LMScast. I'm Joshua Millage. I'm joined today with Christopher Badgett, and today we're talking about how to create from the customer's perspective. And Chris, you have a funny little poster over there on your wall that has to do with this topic. So tell me more about that.
Awesome. Yeah, that poster is it's basically a roadmap created by Bill Aulette. I believe he's a Stanford entrepreneurship teacher. I could be wrong on the school, but one of those schools. He did some he's launched several successful startups himself with co-founders. But essentially, he has created like a roadmap for entrepreneurs to follow, which is on the wall. And I'm always looking at it because it's not. First off, my hat comes off to you education entrepreneurs out there because it's not easy. The hardest thing to do in the world is to make something out of nothing. And it can be fun, it can be exhilarating, but one of the biggest traps we can get into is thinking you have all the answers in your head and not having a customer focus.
Mm-hmm.
So this roadmap up here, which I also have in this book right here, and I can bring it a little closer, starts with how to really focus in on customers and the smart way to approach it.
That's cool. And so can you walk us through some of the steps there?
Yeah, the first part, and I'll say this, like if you're talking to what I would say a real entrepreneur and you're trying to get feedback, really the number one questions are who are you serving, what are you solving, how are you different? Like those are like key things. And if we don't have a target market, we're missing the boat. It's a total waste of time. um,
Mm-hmm.
and most people, they're not focused enough. They may have identified a market, like let's say moms, but they're usually need to go another layer down, like what kind of moms. Um, so the very first steps, according to Bill Aulette in his book Disciplined Entrepreneurship, is to segment your market. What market are you going after? And then within that market, identify the beachhead market. And I think we can talk about that a little bit in terms of LifterLMS. There's a lot of people in e-learning space, but our beachhead market that we want to go after and that we've gone after successfully, is the education entrepreneur. It's the solopreneur who's putting together their training program or starting to put together a training program that includes other teachers. But that's sort of like our beachhead market. And if you think about a beachhead, you think about what in the world wars, like storming the beach at Normandy. Once you take that beach, then you can start looking at where to go from there. But it all starts with defining that beachhead market and also doing your research and figuring out what the total addressable market or TAM is.
Got it. Yeah, that's something that really resonates with me is you want to make sure you're building a product or a service in a market that can sustain the type of company that you want to build. So if you want to grow a large company with lots of revenue, the market has to have a lot of money. You can't build into a market that doesn't have a lot of money. So I think that's a really good point to make, because it is important to focus on a niche, but the niche needs to have enough money. So a good example of that is, the classic dog training. Why do
Mm-hmm.
people talk about dog training? Well, because pet owners are ridiculous. They're price insensitive like crazy. They spend
Yeah.
ridiculous amounts of money. But
Or new parents with a baby coming. That's
new
another one.
parents in with a baby, but it's focused enough, and you can find these people that exist in groups to
Mm-hmm.
talk with them and make connections and grow a business.
Absolutely. Um, and just on that note, another thing you do with the beachhead market is you want to identify that end user persona.
Mm-hmm.
In the marketing world, we call that a customer avatar. But that end user persona, you want to identify what's going on in their life, what they're like, what their interests are, their demographics, their psychographics. You also want to go out and do interviews with real ones that are like out there in reality who may need this product idea you have or the service. And just as Steve Blank says, get out of the building and go do some interviews before you build a single line of code or start developing prototypes and things like that.
Right. Right,
So
absolutely. I would agree with that. I mean, not what is he also says no prototype survives first interaction with a customer or
right.
no product. Yeah, I think that's pretty good. And I don't think any course will either in a lot of ways. So there definitely needs to be a 2.0 and make adjustments for people.
Absolutely. And I think it's important to point out too that some of the entrepreneur education out there or materials, if you're like trying to figure out how to launch a business or create a product or service,
Hmm.
sometimes you get mixed messages. So if you study like an entrepreneur, a serial entrepreneur like Mark Cuban, he'll say his number one thing is ubiquity. So
Hmm.
when he goes after something, he wants mass market. Like I know one of the things in his portfolio of businesses, I believe, is Magnolia Pictures, like a movie production company. Like most people watch movies at some point in their life. Or if you're looking at Steve Jobs and you look at the iPhone or the smartphone, uh, that's sort of like almost everybody or a huge mass market is into smartphones. Now there's segments within that.
Hmm.
But if you're kind of new to the game, I think ubiquity is really hard and it's a long shot. And there's something called survivor bias where you only hear about the Mark Cubans and the Steve Jobs that actually made it. That
Hmm.
road is paved with failed businesses. But if you take a disciplined approach and you really start with a very clearly defined beachhead market with the end user profile with real people that are saying, yes, what you have sounds interesting. You do your life cycle analysis of like what their experiences through your offer, and all businesses have a diffusion of innovation and they grow and die. So it's important to just be realistic about all that stuff and but let your customer drive the innovation. Let that end user persona drive the innovation. Let them tell you where they think you're wrong and listen to them.
And not be overly emotional so that you shut down, which I think a lot of people do. A lot of people
Yeah, I
do.
mean, a business is like having a baby, right? And if
Right.
you like, it's like you can't, you got to let the baby out and you got to get feedback. And it's gonna,
Definitely.
yeah, it's just you can't take it personally. It's like its own creature.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. That's really good. What else, Chris? Is there other steps in this map?
Yeah, I just think I just want to identify that a lot of there's a lot of opportunity to think in the fourth dimension or in time.
Right.
So you got to have your marathon pants on if you want to start a business. You want to be an entrepreneur. It takes some serious stamina, and part of that can give you hope and faith when you're thinking about your customer perspective is when you think about your beachhead market, your early adopters, your innovators, the people who are most likely to listen to you and use your product, the people who you can give the most aggressive messaging to that you really are like carving out a name for. That if you look past them, if you get success with the beachhead market, then there's other what are known as follow-on markets, other customers, other market segments. So it's important to realize that just look long term. Don't take shortcuts and try to go straight to the follow-on markets or be
Mm-hmm.
too general.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, don't feel like you're stuck with your early adopter beachhead market. So if you look at the e-learning space in general, which we're in, if I was in the content game, the publishing game, the last place I would create content around would be development courses because um, it's a market driven by developers that
Mm-hmm.
naturally the Udemy's, the Lyndas of the world, the Plural Sites, all these places started. They've been doing development e-learning for like a decade, but there's
Mm-hmm.
new markets just coming online, like with other like offline things like yoga or lifestyle courses and things that are now coming online. These are like follow-on markets, so it's important to look at where different industries are at if you're going to play the publisher game.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's some great ideas, and you're right. I mean, you can gather some of the best innovative ideas from what other industries are doing. I think that's a great point. Cool. Well, we're coming down to the end of it. I think my suggestion for people, which we mentioned earlier, is always get out of the building and talk to your customers and try and find some common things. But don't think that you also have to build everything for everyone, because if you do, you're not going to wind up happy there either. So it's a balancing act between the two. And yeah, that's my final thoughts. What about you, Chris?
I just want to piggyback on what you're saying and echo your statement about having an open mind when your customers talk back. Like, just be open, because
Yeah,
that's where the real nuggets of wisdom and value that you can then mine as an entrepreneur and develop come from.
absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you everyone for listening, and we'll see you next week with another episode of LMS Cast.